Europeans are going extinct. Did you hear me very well? Europeans are slowly going extinct. Let me tell you how. If care is not taken, Europeans are going to be a minority race in Europe, or Europeans are going to be minority in their different countries. And you know what it means when you become a minority in your own country. For those who don't know what it means, let me explain it to you. Listen to me. My name is Rodi. When you become a minority in your country, it then means you can no longer decide who governs you or who rules you. When you become a minority in your country, you can no longer, or you don't have the power to decide who rules over you. Let me go further. Many countries in Europe runs democratic system of government, which means majority rule. That means during election, majority of the people decides who rules over them. You know, democracy is majority rule. So when you become a minority in Europe, that means you don't have the numbers anymore to decide who rules over you. What happens in this situation? Then foreigners would be the one to decide who rules in your country. Because you are not making babies anymore. Europeans are not making children anymore. Let me go further. Back in the 90s, I told you guys I babysat my children. Listen, my name is Rodi. I like keeping it real. Back in the 90s, when I take my children to the Spielplatz, that is the playground, my children played with typical Austrian children, sometimes European children. In fact, we exchanged numbers because then we had to call ourselves to give appointments when we were coming outside with the children to go play in the Spielplatz, that is playground. Today, when I walk past Spielplatz, that is playground, you don't see typical Austrian children or European setting. You see foreigners' children occupy the playgrounds. Back then in the 90s, when you go to where they make grilling, where they roast meat or things like that, all these areas where they roast meat, you see typical Austrian men and women roast meat, hold parties. Today, during summer, if you go to all these places reserved for grilling meat or roasting or holding small parties, you don't see Austrian people anymore or European people. You see only foreigners there. Men, I like keeping it real. I don't care what you are thinking. Let me just keep it going. Now listen. Back then, in kindergarten, most of the children, 80 to 90% of the children in kindergarten were European children, Austrian children. Back then in the kindergarten, because I took my children to kindergarten. Today, go to the kindergartens. If you go to the kindergarten in Vienna, most of the children in kindergarten today are foreigners' children. Do I take you to Volksschule? If you go to Volksschule, you don't see European children mainly. You see foreigners' children in Volksschule. What? That's primary school. What does that tell you? That means in some years to come, these foreigners' children are the ones to decide what goes on in Europe. Are you listening to me? These foreigners' children are the ones to decide what goes on in Europe or many European countries. Let me go further. I like keeping it real. Back in the 90s, listen to me, I grooved life. That is, I partied a lot. Back then, I went to club a lot during weekends. Guess what? In the clubs, the clubs were filled up with blonde men and women back in the days. You go to clubs, you see blonde men, blonde women in the clubs. Now, even back then, if you are walking on the streets, back then you see blonde girls, blonde men, red-haired men and women. Back then. Today, where are these blonde people? You don't see them anymore. You don't find them anymore. Sometimes I wonder to myself, sometimes I think to myself, I say, man, where am I? Am I somewhere in another continent or in another country? Guys, tell me, sometimes that original European setting is no longer there. Truth must be told. That original European setting is no longer there. You hardly see blonde men and blonde women anymore, like you used to see them back in the 90s. Where are they? Where are the blonde? You see, now let me go further. It then boils down to European people not making babies. European men and women are occupied with their jobs. They don't like making babies. Now what happens? Foreigners are here making babies. And there are foreigners whose agenda is to take over Europe. That is to occupy Europe with their babies. And that is what is happening. Can you not read the handwriting on the wall? Can you not read the handwriting on the wall? So, like I said earlier, democracy is majority rule. So in future, if you don't have the numbers to vote the candidate of your choice, foreigners are the ones who are going to be voting the candidate of their choice. That time, they may vote in someone you don't like, who is not a typical European man or woman. Then what happens? You become a foreigner in your own country or in your own continent. Let me tell you, when we packed in here, in this building where I'm living, my children were the only children in the entire building. All the rest, Europeans, none have a child. They don't have children. It was few years ago that the man living below me was able to have one child, a boy. The whole people living, all my neighbors, they don't have any child. You don't hear children play in this building. You see, most of the people living here are Austrians. You don't hear, all of them. Many are in old people's home now. Many are in Fliegeheim. They don't have children. Here, the woman living opposite me here, his apartment has been locked for 4 years. She has no child. Almost all the people living in this building, they don't have children. They worked and got old and retired at old people's home. Now, you that is watching me, if you are an European, many European women or young girls want to maintain their figure. They are occupied or preoccupied. They occupy themselves with their jobs. The men too. Some, I told you guys I was a taxi driver and a friendly one at that. So I interacted with a lot of people. Many Europeans would tell you they don't have time, that their job wouldn't allow them to make babies. Their women and their men. See, It is never too late. And make sure you share this video to wake Europeans up. It is never too late to start making babies. If not, in the next 10, 15, 20 years to come, foreigners will be the ones deciding what goes on in Europe. Foreigners will be the ones to decide what goes on in Europe here. You understand what I'm saying now? You know I like keeping it real. I love humans. And I don't like making partial videos. I like keeping it real. So I want to bring this video to an end. But before I do, I want you that is a young European lady looking at me now, make babies. You that is a young European man looking at me, make babies. Yes, you have to defend your country and defend your continent before other people take over your countries and your continents. Well, I've spoken my mind. My name is Rodi. Don't forget to follow my page and see you in my next video.